Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out on our rainy spring day for today's Book Sandwiched In. I'm Dina Viviani, the programming manager here. I just want to start with a few housekeeping announcements. For safety purposes, if there is a need to evacuate the building, the door on my right, your left, is our closest exit. For anyone using a hearing aid, we invite you to take advantage of our induction loop system. It amplifies all sound coming through the microphone. Please silence or turn off your cell phones now so as not to disrupt the speaker. And we ask that at the end of the program, if we have time for Q&A, that you wait until this microphone reaches you so that everyone can hear and participate. We'd also like to thank Friends of Brighton Memorial Library for sponsoring this series. And I do want to point out we have a lot of great programs coming up, some sponsored by the Friends. If you want to grab one of the April program brochures, on the table we have books for the upcoming Book Sandwich Inns. We also have a copy of The Color of Law. We have a book discussion happening next week on that. And for other bookish things, tonight in this same room we have Frances Tepper talking about her book, My Fair Lady. She was the director of the Monroe County Fair for years, so she will be here. And I also have copies of, let me get the title, Why Fish Don't Exist, which is going to be our April book discussion book, which is also in the back. We have a Sunday Serenade coming up on Sunday and other things going on, so please do grab one of the April program brochures. And now to introduce our speaker for today, we have Sean Singh. Born in Jamaica, West Indies, Sean emigrated to the United States at an early age. Raised in Queens, New York, he came to Rochester in the 1980s to attend the University of Rochester, where he now works. Sean is the manager of the University iTeam Platform Engineering Linux team. In 2016, he became one of the founding members of CURB, Community Uprooting Racism in Brighton, and which is an education and advocacy group. In that role, he has facilitated discussions on social justice, and he's worked here with BML on previous team book discussion groups, and we did a movie discussion as well. So please welcome Sean.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Yep, excellent. So thank you, Dina, and thank you to the Brighton Library for all the good work you guys do. So you heard a little bit about me, right? And so I am a father of two. My father has passed of COVID. Oh, speaking of which, I am doubly vaxxed and boosted, so I am not wearing a face covering today because of the recording. I want to be heard on the microphones. I want you guys to be able to hear me and see me. But if you're not comfortable with that, I will put on a mask. You okay? All right. I like to start my discussions by hearing a little bit about who I'm talking with. So if you don't mind, I would like to ask you to share a little bit about yourselves. You don't have to say your last names, just 2 or 3 little words about yourself.
I'm Sue, and I have read Personal Librarian. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay.
I'm here by accident because I'm waiting for my 92-year-old husband to tell me that he's got. He did just tell me he's going to be in New York.
Okay.
I'm Elena. I come from Pittsburgh, so I like the things that go on in this library too. I use my own in Pittsburgh, but I like to come here.
Excellent.
Karen, I've been lived in Brighton 51 years.
Very nice.
And my children were raised in the most diverse, wonderful, possible atmosphere. And as middle-aged adults, they still talk about that.
Looks like I did a number I can pass. Yes.
Okay.
I'm Judy. I live in the city, and I come to this library. I feel this is my library.
Excellent.
Jody, and I'm a retired school librarian. I've been in the city school district for 33 years.
Very nice, thank you.
Kathy. I live in Rochester in the city, and I just want to open my mind to different things.
Okay.
Louise, I live in Pittsburgh, but I like these books.
Very nice.
Hi, Barbara. I'm in Pittsburgh, but I grew up, and my kids grew up in Brighton. I taught in the high school. And I read the book, and saw the movie Casting, which I will probably be talking about, as well as the book group. So I'm interested in hearing your point of view.
Yeah, a lot of movies like Passing, Loving. Yep.
I'm Nancy, and I read the book, and I'm anxious to hear what you have to say.
Excellent.
I'm Isadora, retired librarian, avid reader, and looking forward to your comments.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary, and I just literally. My two interests in retirement are reading and classical music.
Excellent.
I'm Carol, I'm a teacher in the school district for 80 years.
Thank you.
I'm Naomi, I've lived in Brighton for over 50 years, and I love this book.
Nice. I love it too.
I'm Chloe, and I'm a reader, and
Yeah, I grew up in Queens. I went to Hillcrest High School. Yep.
Hi, Ann. I'm also a retired school librarian. I'm Jackie, I live in Brighton, and I live here, and I'm on the ESI committee.
Nice.
I'm Jennifer Reese-David, I'm the executive director of the library, also an avid reader, and support BSI.
All right, so now I'm nervous.
I'm Ashley Stoffer. I'm a retired English teacher, high school vice principal, and elementary principal, and I'm a member of the Friends Group board.
Excellent.
I'm Anne. I'm on the BSI committee, and I'm also the current president of the Friends of the Library.
Okay, nice.
My name is Lucy. I'm also on the board of the library, also involved with the BSI committee. I've raised 3 children in the Brighton School District and actually discussed this book with my adultish children, and I'm very interested in hearing what you say.
Okay.
I'm Cindy. I grew up in a very non-diverse community, but have lived here in Brighton for 35 years, and on the BSI committee and Friends Board as well.
Thank you. Thank you all. So, as I was saying, you've heard a little bit about me. As I was reading these books, I found myself sort of gravitating to one concept in particular. The concept, say, who are you? Right? Like I said, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a program analyst at the university, but being a programmer isn't really who I am, right? Being a father is part of me, it's not all of who I am, right? So what is it that makes you you? When do you stop being you, right? Do you always take a piece of you with you, right? Being from the West Indies, there's a big part of my life that is built around, not really the language, we speak English. It might be a little bit different than the English I'm speaking now. The food is different. But those are things that come with me and are part of me. And no matter where I go, no matter what I do, those things are part of me. So what is it when in these stories we see people change? They say they're different, right? So Vanishing Half, how many of you have still yet to read the book? Okay, just a couple. All right. So I'm not going to give away too much, right? The Vanishing Half story of 2 sisters. Didn't read it. Okay. We'll talk about both. The story of 2 sisters separated when they were young, and lived very different lives. One sister kind of stayed true to her identity. The other passed. Right? She pretended that she was white and lived a very different life than her sister. And it is interesting to me to think about what it is that you would have to give up to live that kind of life. My parents came here when I was very young. They gave up their entire way of life so that we could have a better life. That is a very common story with immigrants, right? Come to the United States, you gotta, to live the dream, right? And when I became a father, I actually had a conversation with my mom, and I said, as an adult, thank you and for the sacrifices that she made, that my dad and her both made, to bring us to this country, because they gave up a lot. And when I became father, I realized that in order for us to have a really good life for our kids, we were going to have to make some changes and some sacrifices, and we did. And but for a teenager to decide that she wants a better life and she needs to make changes and to give up everything that she knows, especially a twin, right? You've heard about twins having their own language, this kind of telepathy. They know what each others are thinking. To be able to leave your sister and lead a radically different life, how isolating must that be? I mean, for me, I'm an adult, I have a car, I can go wherever I want. If I want West Indian food, I know where to go, I know how to get it. If I want to socialize with West Indians, I know how to seek them out, and I can do that as an adult, right? But as a teen, looking for a job, looking to make your way in the world as someone completely different, and that's a different world, right? Today, we've got credit cards and, all these things. I couldn't do it today. Right? I couldn't leave my life completely behind. It would take a lot of intestinal fortitude, right? A really strong person to be able to do that. But through the book, I get the sense that she didn't really leave it all behind. Right? She has this kind of yearning for a connection. And her personality is such that she is very withdrawn. She doesn't connect very well with her daughter. But there's a neighbor moves in next door. The neighborhood kind of fights it. She, in fact, spoke out against this colored neighbor moving in next door. But without even realizing what it is that she's lost, this sense of community, a family, a connection, she befriends the neighbor, right? And she finds a connection with someone where she has been isolating herself for all these years. And she finds, yeah, there is something here. Now, she has chosen a very particular life for herself, so she's still got walls up, right? She still kind of denies that connection in public, but in private, I think she's really longing for that connection. And I can understand that, right? as a West Indian living in this community where there is not a lot of West Indians, there are some here, and again, I can find them if I would like to, but being away from your family, being away from your community is hard. And when I think about the women in these books, I think, how strong must they have been to go through this? In the Personal Librarian, which is similar, Belle, and we've had a couple of people have read this one, right? Yep. Belle, the Personal Librarian to J.P. Morgan, is passing as white, and she, however, doesn't leave her family, but because of the times, she can't let people know she's black, right? She's got to keep herself isolated, though not as much. She still goes back and sees her family, but she is living a rather different life. So different that her isolation causes her to reach out to someone and start a relationship with a married man, because she feels a connection. Right? So that sense of connection is running through both stories. Did anyone else get that sense from their readings, or is that what you picked up on? A little bit, yeah. What struck you when you read? Yeah.
What you said, what was missing, you know, and what also was, she always had to be on her guard to, as she's passing, to act as the white community that she is identifying with, trying to pass into. And so there's a lot of suppression there. And I think that comes out in her guardedness, comes out in her relationship with her daughter, who she can't have a close relationship with her. She's so guarded. And the whole irony of what transpires. But there is that strong sense, and I think that being Jewish, for example, I know that I grew up living a Jewish life, a double life. It's a sense of doubling that you have. I grew up in a small town in which the Jewish population was very, very few. And so I had my private life where I identified as a Jew, but then to the greater community, there's a lot of anti-Semitism there, as I can relate to the reasons why one wants to pass. That the society, if you can pass for the majority culture, then you do it sometimes to avoid the prejudice that you will experience.
So women have certain standards that people ask of them, or you feel like you have to live up to, but then putting the religion on top of it, right? There's a different set of expectations. The sense of, the suppression that you talked about is very real for the African American community. Remember, I came from Jamaica, West Indies. People tell me, well, you don't look Jamaican, you don't sound Jamaican. I have this conversation a lot. When I was in grade school, it was very apparent to me, excuse me, that people who spoke differently, who carried themselves differently, were regarded differently. people with accents were generally labeled as less knowledgeable. They were less than. And it was so severe that as a child, I knew that in order to get by, I needed to change. So I talk the way I talk very specifically because I need to fit in to the society.
Did you switch back and forth?
My wife says that when I'm with my family, I speak very differently. Yeah.
I would like to distinguish between, because I'm also an immigrant, and I feel that the fact that I come from an English-speaking country distinguishes me from somebody who may not speak English first language. So within those accent prejudices, for want of a better word, there are definitely differences too. So yeah, I mean, I'm also very aware of that.
Yeah, and it's no matter where you come from. Even, like I said, in Jamaica, we speak English. It's just a little different. And that difference is enough to cause the othering. My cousin Yuval had a speech impediment. Nothing wrong with him, he just spoke differently, but he got a label because of that speech impediment. Right? This is the world that I grew up in, right? Yeah, I can definitely relate with these women, right? There is definitely a need to protect yourself, right, from people who want to other you. Again, growing up in school in New York City, because I was different, I was treated differently. And this was junior high school. I had a job working in the shop at the high school. Had a friend of mine, said he was interested. I advocated for him, he got a job. We talked, we find out there are a series of parties that happen on the weekends with the middle schoolers, and I found out that I'm not invited, right? Okay, that's fine. I talk to this guy, I think we're friends, and I say, how come I don't get invited to these? Well, I don't know. Well, why don't you come to the next one? Okay, but are you asking me because you want me there, or because I'm saying that I noticed that you are excluding me? Does it matter? Right? When you are living in a community that doesn't embrace you, you do tend to put up walls. I have been told at work that I am standoffish. It's like, okay. And this was actually in a performance evaluation once. I was focusing on my work. It's like, okay, but you don't fit in. So you do what you need to do to fit in. Except Belle likes to push the envelope. Belle, from Personal Librarian, she likes to push the envelope. Instead of doing what's always expected of her, right? She takes the opportunity to distinguish herself at the parties. She wears more flamboyant gowns. She's a little more extroverted than people would imagine her to be. Right? So she kind of pushes that envelope. And I know you probably identify with that, because you said you were a troublemaker.
Where?
Earlier today.
I'm listening.
Yeah.
I am listening.
You're listening.
No, I'm relating. I'm appalled. I'm empathizing. It's hitting.
I'm just teasing.
I excuse me, have a half-Cuban daughter-in-law, a Brazilian daughter-in-law, and an Italian son-in-law. I'm Jewish. Go on. Go on.
She's not troublemaker.
No, I so empathize.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, not a problem. Not a problem. So. Let's go back to fitting in. How far would you go to fit in? Right? I'll give you another story. We have social groups, right? I'm sure a lot of you have friends, you go out, you do things. Is it common? No, it's not. In my social groups, often I'm the only African American. Right? When we go out, we go to, when I was younger, go to a dance club, do whatever. Again, the only person of color there. We once, my social group in this situation, we went to a club that was primarily African American. Now, the people I went with were uncomfortable. It was different. It was not what they were used to. So uncomfortable that they chose to leave. How far does a person go to fit in with the community that they're living in? These women, oh, did you have a question? Yeah, it's a real thing, right? The melanin in kids doesn't show up right away. So it's like a time bomb. You don't know whether you're going to be outed sooner or later. Very, very, very real thing. And the way that she's treated is common as well. A lot of women who have children with, and it's not just in the African American community, she was basically abandoned by her lover. I am not going to tell that story. It's not my story to tell. So, where was I? Oh yeah, so community, they created identities for themselves, totally and apart, and chose to live separate lives so that they could fit in. Someone here mentioned movies earlier. There are a couple of movies that that touch on similar topics. Did any of you see the Green Book? Yeah. The pianist there, he led sort of an isolated life, didn't he? Yeah.
Well, he said, because, as he said, he was having a very tough time being a pianist, and his wife kind of didn't accept that he was gone so much, and the way it was.
Yeah, he had a lot going on. He was trying to get by in white America, and he was gay. Yeah, he had a lot going on.
As I'm looking at aspects of that, two women who was living in the white community and one was not. It's very well done. You understand?
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, read the book. And she's flamboyant. She's passing, but she's in your face, and she's flamboyant. The author wrote the book very early on in the 1900s, and it's a book, and influenced the author of The Vanishing Half as well. So it's an interesting read, and she's really really ahead of her time in this book. So, but I think Netflix has done a great job with the movie. The ending is going to, cause for discussion, but leaves it sort of hanging.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you asked who would choose to do this, and my reaction is it's too high a price, because I didn't read The Personal Librarian, but I read passages of the movie, read Vanishing Half, and I think that the impact it has on one's mental health is too severe a price. That you are trading for what you think is an advantage, being white, but you give up so much of yourself that you never really feel whole. And that it's very wearing on one's psyche to keep pretending. And in passing, there's a tremendous longing to go back to one's roots. And I think that also, was coming out of Vanishing Half, is that there was a steep price that she paid.
It is, but fear is a big motivator, right?
Well, she's afraid to get caught.
She slept with a baseball bat, right? She saw her father pulled out of the house, right? And beaten up. He died in the hospital. And as a kid, right, she was scarred by that. So, and she carried that with her for the rest of her life, right? Even after she was married, she slept with the baseball bat next to the bed. She came down once with the bat when her daughter snuck in late at night. So fear is what motivated her, right?
Then there's the fear of being caught.
But what's worse, right? You got to think about that calculus in your head.
She was in fear either way. That's what I'm trying to say, is that she didn't escape. She escaped one fear and traded it for another, because she was afraid she'd be outed. So she wasn't gaining a sense of security in either path.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I think,
it's okay. You don't have to
no, I'm just thinking to live with that fear, that daily fear, right? The town that she came from didn't even, well, so there's the prejudice in the community. The white people, there's prejudice in the town, right? So they didn't, even the black folk in the town appreciated the lighter folk more than the darker folk.
I was going to say, the town was known for its light-skinned black people, and I did not think that it was tremendous amount of prejudice against them. They were considered the upper echelon of the neighborhood.
The sense of lighter blacks, darker blacks, and that that's also very real, very real. And there are those who, even if you are darker and carry yourself differently, you could be othered within the community for that. So there are multiple levels of...
Change the way you speak and you're other.
Yeah. So that's very real. I've been called an Oreo before. So it's very real. Oh no, I don't fit in anyway. I'm not black enough for the black community. I'm not white enough for the white community. So it is a tough life to live sometimes. Did I see another question?
Can I ask you a question, John?
Sure.
You're talking about, like in both books, there's this part where they have to give, well, I guess in Vanishing Half, we were talking about giving up your family, and so the woman, who's passing and moves off to California on her own, she completely leaves her family. And then in the other book, Belle still gets to see her family, but her father didn't believe in what she was doing, so he left them. So both of them did lose family members over this, and I guess the Personal Librarian, though, it was more of like the mother pushing the daughter to continue this because she, identified this intelligence and this drive in her and wanted her to succeed and didn't think she could otherwise. So in some ways, the mother was willing to give up her marriage for the daughter to pass too. So just so many different layers of...
Right. The father, Richard, took a very different approach. He was very much fighting for equal rights, social justice, and he wanted the family to get by changing society to accept them. The mother just wanted the kids to get by and pass in order to just fit into society. So they both wanted the best for their kids, two radically different approaches. Yeah.
And then I wondered what your opinion is for Personal Librarian on whether you think J.P. Morgan ever had any idea that she was like leading this double life, and just for fear of him appearing stupid or inept, he may have kept it a secret, or do you think that for their whole relationship, just your opinion, do you think that he ever suspected?
I think he might have. This is purely speculative. He had his doubts about Mr. Berenson. And I think that if you work for someone like J.P. Morgan in such a capacity, he probably would have done some investigation into your family. And he probably eventually found out. But, she was doing a really good job for him. And, he was benefiting from that relationship. So it's possible that the flirtations didn't continue because he found out. But, much of that is speculation. I mean, she was a real person, but a lot of the day-to-day stuff is sort of speculative.
Do you want to do more questions and more back and forth?
We can do more questions if anyone has any.
There's a lot of engagement, so I certainly can if you want. Does anyone want? Now that I said they don't want the mic. All right, go ahead.
All right. Personal Librarian. So she did not give up her family, but again, I resonated with this book as well. I mean, she took care of her family. She had the family compound she bought upstate, and she was always sending money home. Very, very tight-knit family. Very, very common in some communities to do that as well. So, very, very familiar concept to me. Yes?
Wasn't it the mother that made the decision for the whole family when they moved up north that they were going to be white from, and everybody went along with it, only the father didn't, so they didn't have any relationships anymore?
Yes.
It wasn't the young woman that made the decision. I mean, she needed it for her job, but she would have never even looked at for the job unless the whole family had made this.
Yes, the mother did make the decision, and it was a source of contention with the father, and he eventually left, and then started a new life in Japan. Yeah, it was definitely the mother's decision. But when you live with strong personalities, the mother, even my own family, mom rules the house.
I think that's the way it is all the way.
About the mother.
Mm.
Prejudice is learned of the mother's knee and other joints.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Would you like to say some more about that? Prejudice is...
No, you're talking about it.
Prejudice is learned at the mother's knee and other joints.
And other who?
Other joints.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, so in fact, there was the scene where they go back to Washington, D.C., and the rest of the family doesn't agree with the decision either. And so there's definitely some tension there. It was definitely the mother's decision to help the kids by passing. Yeah?
If you don't mind if I this might be construed as a personal question, but I'm curious because you were talking about your own parents' move to the US and what they gave up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have raised children in this country, and I'm curious where you feel about them having moved here. Do you feel like you lost out on anything from having moved, or from them having moved here?
I don't feel that I've lost anything. I still have a connection with the community, and all of my father's siblings decided to do the same thing. I have an uncle in New Jersey, an uncle in Florida, an uncle in Calgary, and my mom, in order for her to live a better life, she was sent to live with someone else. So she didn't live with her family in Jamaica at all. And she didn't have a relationship with her sisters until a couple of years ago, I think about 2-3 years ago. I went to Jamaica. I sat in my aunt's house. At my mother's sister's house. And I left the house, and I didn't know that that woman was related to us. I just thought it was just another visit to someone my parents knew. And so, but I don't feel like I've missed out. I feel like I have been blessed with the life that I have now. I have a better job than I probably would have if I stayed in Jamaica. I met my wife here, and I certainly wouldn't give up that relationship for anything. And No, it is a different life. I would not say it's a better, different. Oh, it is different, but no, I wouldn't give it up.
What do you think, like as a parent, what do you think it would feel like, when I'm thinking of the vanishing half, for the mother when her daughter just disappears? I mean, do you think that the mother had an inkling? And how maybe like she would have tried to reconcile that in her own head? Or just any thoughts on that from the mother's point of view in Vanishing Half?
That is a tough one, because she lost both of them at the same time. So I don't think that the mother would have had any idea. She was probably devastated to lose both of them. And she didn't know that that one was passing and the other wasn't. She just knew that they both disappeared. So that whole aspect of it didn't come in until many, many years later. But yeah, I mean, just losing a kid is hard. Losing 2 kids, she must have been devastated for a long time.
We are going to be allowed to ask personal questions. So you're obviously a parent. Are your children in the Brighton Public Schools?
Yes, they are.
So how do you handle the fact that you yourself have told us all that you feel like displaced, being a person of color? Am I speaking the right language?
No, that's fine.
So how do you communicate that to your children? How do your children feel? What your children, do your children look like you? Like, how is it to be very aware of what you are aware of for yourself and then raise children?
So that has informed, I've used that to help discussions about fitting into society, how they carry themselves. There are several discussions that every African American family has with their kids. You know, you're walking in a store, don't be touching everything. We have discussions about how they carry themselves in public and how you work twice as hard for half as much. Those discussions. The reason that I got involved with CURB is so that my kids wouldn't have to deal with some of the issues that I had to deal with. They knew why I was doing it. They've been to some of the events. They participate. So I don't hide any of that from them. We have discussions about it. We watch movies like Loving, and because we are a mixed-race family, and we talk about all of the issues. Yeah.
Many, many years ago, when my daughter was 5 years old, we invited a man to come to dinner who was from Jamaica, very dark, well-educated guy. He happened to be a bachelor. He came to dinner, and my 5-year-old daughter piped up and said, "Mommy, why is that guy?" And I was dreading what she was going to say. And she said, "How come he didn't bring his mommy and little girl when he came to dinner?" To her, that was the difference. And communities are very different. I grew up in a mixed school in Connecticut. Here in Rochester, decades ago, I worked with some people. There was a black librarian from Jamaica. And at lunch one day after a meeting, she told me what a hard time she was having in Rochester. She would be the last one waited on at a store when there were white people. The driver treated her nastily. I was away for a while, and when I came back, I said, "Where is so-and-so?" And the other white librarian said, "Oh, it was too cold for her here." They literally meant the weather climate.
Rochester can be a tough place.
And then there were, in the 1970s, a black reporter came and tried to rent an apartment. Each time he was told, "Oh, I'm sorry, it was just rented," so they sent a white reporter out, who of course was offered the apartment. What got me was the letters to the editor saying, "Oh, you made that up, that doesn't really happen here."
Yeah, Rochester can be a tough place. I remember going to a barber shop in the 19th Ward, black barber shop. All the customers were black. Even there, there was a comment about how Jamaicans were taking their jobs. You know, and Saturday Night Live had a skit. It must have been about 10, 15 years ago now, about Jamaicans particularly, and how they all have 2 or 3 jobs. Now, I didn't want to tell these people in the barbershop, "Hey, look, Jamaicans take jobs nobody else wants to take. They just want to hustle and get their families here, you know, live their lives." But yeah, prejudice and issues like that are not just, you know, white, black. It happens within the black community as well. Yeah.
Along those lines too, in Vanishing Half, that was, you know, part of the reason that the one daughter who married a man who was darker skinned and then had, you know, the daughter who didn't vanish when he was hunting the other one. I mean, that was a lot of cause for infighting within her family as well. Now again, this man was not a nice man, so, but that aside, that didn't seem to concern the family, you know, the white, or the very light family, that she would go for this man who was darker, and they're like, "What are you doing? What are you thinking?" So again, just sort of like the in-group, you know, who's better or not, even not based at all on the fact this was not a good man, but just on skin color.
Yeah, skin colors, and it's not just an American thing. Hotel Rwanda, read the books, saw the movie, yeah, right?
What is the book again you mentioned?
Hotel Rwanda, about the genocide that happened in that country. But, you know, colonial forces come in, they create this artificial difference between the light skin and the dark skin people in the country, and have created a rift between the people in that country. And the war that started really just because one group thought that they were different or better. Being othered is, it's all about power. It doesn't really necessarily have to be about color. It can happen anywhere to any of us.
Does anyone else want to make a comment? Question, comment? It's been good because it's been sort of discussion style our whole way through. I know we picked up a lot of great comments from people. We're kind of wrapping up. Do you want to make any last comments yourself, Sean?
No, I would just, if you haven't read one or the other, I would encourage you to. They're both good reads.